Here's a scenario, tell me if it hits. She's a registered nurse, he's in sales, together they're pulling in $140,000 a year, top 20% of American households, and on paper they should be set, retirement accounts growing, a vacation every summer, number 2 a.m. panic attacks about bills, date nights that don't end with both of them falling asleep on the couch by 9, instead they have 6 weeks of savings. Last spring their furnace died and they floated it on a credit card because there was literally nothing else to pull from. They barely see each other during the week except for those few quiet exhausted hours before sleep. They're both running on caffeine and willpower, and every single month despite 2 professional incomes, 2 college degrees, 2 people giving their absolute best hours to their careers, they feel like they're one bad week away from a genuine financial disaster. And here's the part that should genuinely disturb you. They did everything right. They went to college, built real careers, got married, combined their finances, bought a home in a good neighborhood with solid schools, contributed to their 401ks, avoided lifestyle debt, followed every single rule the system ever gave them, checked every box society told them to check, and they still lie awake at 2 a.m. mentally running through bills. So why does following all the rules still feel like losing? Why does a household earning nearly 6 figures from 2 working adults feel more financially fragile than a one-income family from 50 years ago? If you have ever looked at your combined paychecks and quietly thought we make way too much money to feel this stressed, then stay with me because in the next few minutes everything is going to start making a lot of sense. And what you are about to learn is not a budgeting tip, it is not a side hustle recommendation, it is the actual structural reason that 2-income households in America are more financially fragile than they have ever been in history. There's a story we have been told since we were old enough to understand money. 2 incomes are always better than 1. It is just math, right? If one person earning $50,000 can support a household, then 2 people each earning $50,000 should support that same household and have an entire extra $50,000 left over every single year to build wealth with. Clean, simple, logical. The kind of math that feels so obvious you would be embarrassed to question it out loud, except that math has almost nothing to do with how real 2-income households actually experience their finances day to day. And what actually happened over the last 50 years is one of the most consequential and least discussed financial bait-and-switches in modern American history. It even has a name, the 2-income trap, a term first introduced by Elizabeth Warren back in 2003 when she was a Harvard bankruptcy law professor, long before most people knew her name, and she and her daughter co-authored an entire book after studying over 2,000 families who had filed for bankruptcy, and what they discovered was genuinely stunning. 2-income households were not more financially secure than single-income households, they were more vulnerable. Families with both parents working full-time were actually more likely to end up in bankruptcy court than families with only one earner. Read that again, working harder, earning more, bringing home 2 paychecks, doing exactly what the modern economy told you to do, and you end up statistically more likely to lose everything. That is not a personal failure, that is a structural trap. And millions of people are living inside it right now without realizing it. To understand how we got here, you need to go back to 1970 because the contrast is genuinely jarring. Back then, roughly 43% of women participated in the paid workforce. The typical middle-class family ran on 1 income, and here is what we never talk about. That single income was genuinely enough, not barely scraping by, not cutting it close every month, actually enough. Census data shows that a median single-income family in 1970 could purchase a median-priced home and spend only about 25% of their gross income on the mortgage. They could afford healthcare, a car, groceries, annual family trips, and still have real money left over at the end of the month. And more importantly, they had something priceless that most modern households have completely given away: a financial backup. If the primary earner lost their job or became ill, the stay-at-home parent could enter the workforce. That second potential income sat in reserve like an insurance policy ready to be activated only if crisis actually hit. It was the greatest hidden safety net most families ever had, and they did not even think of it in those terms. Fast forward to today, and female workforce participation has climbed to nearly 57%. The dual-income household is now the overwhelming norm across America. We activated the emergency backup plan and made it the permanent operating standard. And while household incomes did rise, look at what happened to the cost side of the equation. Median home prices adjusted for inflation have more than doubled since 1970. Healthcare costs per household have exploded by over 600%. Childcare, which was barely a line item in the single-income era because someone was actually home, now costs American families an average of $11,000 per year per child, and in major metro areas that number climbs to $20,000 or $30,000 annually. College tuition has increased by over 1,200% since 1980. The fixed costs of living a normal middle-class life have grown at a pace that wages simply cannot match. And every single extra dollar that came from adding a second worker to the household got completely absorbed by those exploding fixed costs. The math never added up the way anyone promised it would. Now here is the math that most dual-income couples never actually sit down and run, and I need you to pay close attention here because this is where the trap becomes impossible to ignore. Let's say one partner earns $75,000 and the other earns $55,000, giving you a $130,000 combined household income. That feels substantial. That feels like you're doing well. That feels like you should definitely be fine. So let's trace exactly what happens to that $55,000 second income dollar by dollar. First, because of how progressive tax brackets work, that second income sits on top of the first and gets taxed at your household's highest marginal rate. When you factor in federal income tax, state income tax, and payroll taxes, the effective rate on that second income can easily reach 32 to 36%. So your $55,000 immediately shrinks to somewhere around $35,000 in actual take-home pay before you have spent a single dollar. Next, if you have even one child in daycare, subtract roughly $15,000. 2 children, subtract $30,000. Your $55,000 is now worth somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000 depending on your childcare situation. Then add the cost of a second vehicle, because in most American cities you simply cannot have 2 working adults sharing one car. The commuting expenses, the gas, the maintenance, the insurance, the parking, that runs another $8,000 to $10,000 per year conservatively. And finally, 2 completely exhausted working parents simply cannot handle all the domestic labor that a household requires, so you outsource it: DoorDash, restaurants, cleaning services, lawn care, convenience purchases, because there is genuinely no time or energy left after working, commuting, and parenting. That lifestyle tax adds another $6,000 to $10,000 per year, so add it all up and the $55,000 second income after taxes, childcare, commuting, and exhaustion spending might net your household somewhere between $2,000 and $7,000 per year. That is not a rounding error. That is the trap. Someone is missing family dinners every night, grinding through traffic every single morning, spending less time with their kids during years they will never get back, running their health into the ground. And the actual real financial contribution to the household after everything is honestly accounted for is a few $1,000s a year. But you never see these numbers clearly because the gross income looks enormous. You see $130,000 on your tax return and make every single financial decision based on that number. You buy the house that 2 incomes qualify you for. You take on car payments that 2 incomes can service. The mortgage lender looks at your combined income, says yes, and you sign the papers feeling like you finally made it, and everything works perfectly as long as both incomes keep flowing without interruption forever. Which means no layoffs, no serious illness, no family emergencies, no burnout, no career pivots, no aging parents who suddenly need care, nothing unexpected ever. And that is the trap snapping completely shut, because the single-income family from 1970 had real margin for error. The modern dual-income family has already spent every inch of that margin. Both incomes fully committed to fixed monthly expenses, so if one disappears for any reason, the household cannot sustain itself even temporarily. That is why 2-income families were statistically more likely to go bankrupt, not because they were reckless or irresponsible, but because they had zero cushion, zero backup, zero room to absorb a single financial shock without the whole structure cracking. A 2019 Federal Reserve survey found that nearly 40% of American adults could not cover a $400 emergency without borrowing money, and many of those people live in dual-income households. They are not broke because they do not earn enough. They are broke because their expenses quietly expanded over years to consume every single dollar they brought home. So the real solution is this: stop treating both incomes as permanent guaranteed building blocks of your fixed costs and start treating the second income as temporary, supplemental, and entirely directed toward building actual wealth. Deliberately size your non-negotiable monthly expenses so that one income alone can comfortably cover them. Then the second Income goes directly and immediately into your emergency fund, your retirement accounts, your index funds, your debt payoff. Yes, this means buying a less expensive home than the bank says you qualify for, driving older or cheaper cars, choosing good schools over elite ones, looking like you are living below your means even when both of you are grinding full-time. But within a decade of doing this consistently, the investments funded by that second income begin compounding and generating their own returns. You build actual financial resilience instead of the illusion of it. You get back the one thing that modern dual-income households have traded away entirely: options. The freedom to have one partner step back if health demands it, the freedom to take a career risk without the whole thing imploding, the freedom to absorb whatever life throws at you without a single unexpected expense turning into a catastrophe. Because the families winning financially right now are not always the highest earners, they are the ones who refused to let their expenses grow every single time their income grew. They preserved their flexibility while everyone around them spent theirs. And you cannot earn your way out of a trap you do not know you are in, but now you know. And that is exactly where everything starts to change.